Today I want to talk for a few minutes about Frigid Forage's Big-N-Beasty blend. And this is a blend that has 4 different types of brassicas in it. It's got rapes, radishes, sugar beets, and turnips. And they're all forage variety, which means that they produce a lot of tops, but they also produce the bulbs as well. And what happens is the deer will feed on the tops early in the season, through the middle of the season, and then kind of later, as you get into winter, they'll start to consume the bulbs. So it's a great attractant that starts to work mid-season right on through to the end of the season, right on into the late season. And it fits into our food plot program here really well. There's a couple places where it's ideal for us. One is if we've planted a food plot to soybeans, for example, and the deer have hammered it real hard, and there's certain areas of that plot that don't really have any soybeans in it by the end of the summer. That's the perfect place to till up and establish the Big-N-Beasty plot. We've had drought years where some of the things that we planted in the spring just didn't grow at all. Then you start getting into some rains when you get into August and September. Again, you can save that entire food plot with the Big-N-Beasty by planting that in the late summer. And then sometimes we just leave it a field fallow or plant it to clover and then till it up and then plant it to Big-N-Beasty during that designated time frame late in the summer. So you're normally planting it, depending upon where you're at geographically in North America, you're generally looking at sometime between about the tail end of July through sometime in August as your planting period for Big-N-Beasty. And I like to go as early as I can to get as much growth and as much tonnage as possible by the time we get into the season. Certain varieties within the blend are more attractive to the deer at different times of the year. So you're going to get some that they select and pick on during the, like say, September, October time frame. Then they'll leave those alone and they'll start working on other parts of the blend later in the season, November, December. You know, having it planted a little bit early does benefit you from that standpoint because you are attracting more deer to that plot earlier in the year, and that could benefit you for either early season hunting or just getting those deer into the routine of visiting that spot. So get in the ground fairly early. The first thing you want to do, you always want to make sure you've got a soil test. Frigid Forage does sell prepaid, postage stamped, fully stamped, whatever you want to call that, packages, kits, where you can take your soil sample, put it in the bag, and just drop it in the mailbox, and it goes right to the lab, gets analyzed, and the results come straight back to you. You don't have to mess around with taking it someplace or figuring out how much postage to add, etc. It's all ready for you. You just drop it right in the mail. But make sure you get that soil test because you have to be able to maintain the correct pH of the soil, and you have to be able to maintain the correct fertility. And prior to tilling, that's when you want to do your soil amendments, which would be your fertilizer or your pH adjustment. And for the pH, you're either looking at lime or there's other companies too now that make the liquid calcium product, which allows you to raise the pH just by spraying it on the soil. Big-N-Beasty really likes nitrogen. It's the most important of the nutrients that you add. Always your P and Ks are going to be important with just about anything that you plant, but some types of plants do really well with nitrogen and some of them don't need it. Big-N-Beasty is one of those that really does well with nitrogen. So keep that in mind. Don't short yourself on the fertilizer. Soil test, fertilizer. First step before you even put the fertilizer down is to go in, like I said, take the soil test, but then spray it. You want to use some type of like a glyphosate type of a product that is a universal killer of all weeds and all plants. Spray it, and you want to give it at least a couple of weeks for it all to die down. It's a lot easier to till something when the roots are dead. You know, if you go in there and try to till something up when the roots are still alive, it usually doesn't work nearly as effectively as it does when those plants are just completely dead. And then this also gives you the opportunity with a couple of weeks to use a method that we call the poor man plot. And all we do is we spray it, give it 2 weeks to dry down and die, and we burn off the residue. And then we have direct access to the soil with the seed. It's really difficult to get the seed to the soil so you can get good germination if you don't do something to clear out that residue. So spraying it early, getting it nice and brown and dead, allows you to till it up a lot cleaner. It also allows you to burn it off if you're not able to till the soil. You can either apply the seed using a drill, which is, you know, the ideal way. You want to plant real shallow, so it's going to be more of a brilliant type, cultipacker type of a drill versus one that has the disc openers and runs the seed deeper into the ground. Because you tend to get the seed a little bit too deep when you've tilled it and then you run it through with disc openers. You can get way too deep. So you want it real shallow, either spread on top of the ground with a broadcast seeder or laid right on top of the ground with a cultipacker type seeder. And if you broadcast it on, the next step is going to be packing it. So you make sure you get that good seed to soil contact. That's what allows you to get the absolute best germination, because if the seed isn't in really good contact with the ground, it dries up too fast. As soon as it gets a little bit of moisture on it, it wants to germinate, but there's nothing there to sustain it. The seed's sitting out there by itself. It doesn't really have any place to really, bond to. So good seed to soil contact is super important. But if you're just spreading the seed on top of ground that you're not going to till and haven't tilled, like what we do with these poor man plots, then it's usually best if you rake it real aggressively or in some way create more porosity in the soil, more places where the seed can fit in and sort of find a niche. That way when the rains come, then it works it down in there and you get that good seed to soil contact that way. You just want to follow the seeding rates on the bag. You get a full plant when they're separated a little distance from each other. They get better access to moisture, better access to nutrients. If you're broadcasting the seed into areas that haven't been tilled, similar to this poor man plot method, you're going to go a little bit heavier there because your germination rate is going to drop somewhat. So a 25% rate increase over the rate suggested on the bag is about ideal. Well, that's pretty much it for Big-N-Beasty. It should take off and go on its own. It grows fast, and usually planting in the late summer like that, you don't get a lot of weed competition right away. So normally you can get a really nice clean stand. We've had a lot of success hunting over the Big-N-Beasty over the years. And like I said, it's really saved us a few times when we've had difficult conditions, either food plots that failed or spots where the deer have really hammered some of our other plots. And I've also had a number of plots every year on the farm that are devoted, right from the beginning to the Big-N-Beasty. So get out there and get this stuff planted and it'll improve your deer hunting.